Chapter 21. The Hall of Echoes. The Hall of Echoes was not a place one visited lightly. Built deep within the oldest cliffs of Asgard, its vaulted chambers resonated with whispers from centuries past. Every footstep there seemed to awaken ghostly voices, repeating fragments of oaths, betrayals, and long-forgotten victories. Thor arrived first, Mjölnir resting on his shoulder, his breath misting in the cold air. A single shaft of moonlight cut through the high, arched doorway, casting silver across the ancient stone floor. Moments later, Sif emerged from the shadows, her golden hair bound back, eyes sharp as drawn steel. "Are you sure about this?" she asked quietly. "No," Thor replied. "But Loki knows something about the view. If we ignore him, we may walk into battle blind." Baldur entered last, his presence almost luminous against the gloom. "We must tread carefully. This hall remembers lies as easily as truths." From the far end of the chamber, slow clapping echoed. Loki stepped forward from the darkness, his emerald cloak glinting faintly in the moonlight. "Well?" "The heroes of Asgard, punctual for once." Thor scowled. "Enough. Tell us what you know." Loki strolled to the center of the hall, tracing a finger over a series of carved runes in the floor. "The Veilfang is not just a blade. It's a prison, forged to contain something far older than frost giants, something even Odin feared to speak of." Sif frowned. "A prison? For what?" Loki's smile faded slightly. "A fragment of Hggrs essence, the serpent that gnaws at the roots of Ig. When Thrym wields the Veilfang, he's not just armed with a weapon, he's carrying a key. If he strikes the right place, in the right way, the prison breaks." Baldur's face darkened. "And then, Loki said softly, "the serpent awakens, and the 9 realms burn from the roots upward." Thor tightened his grip on me. "You're certain? Would I lie about something that could kill us all?" Loki smirked. Then, after a pause, "Yes, of course I would. But not this time." The silence that followed was heavy. The whispers in the stone seemed to grow louder, carrying words none of them could quite understand. Finally, Loki stepped closer. "I can get us into Thrym's fortress. I can lead you to the Veil. But when this is over, I walk free of whatever judgment Odin has in mind for me. That is my price." Thor's jaw clenched. He hated the thought of striking such a bargain. But he also knew they had no other path. "Fine," Thor said at last. "But if you betray us," Loki cut him off with a grin. "If I betray you, brother, you'll never see me coming." Outside, the wind howled like 1,000 distant wolves. Inside, the 4 gods stood in uneasy alliance, the fate of the 9 realms balanced on a thread. Chapter 22. The Frozen Gates of Thrymheim. The wind on the borders of Jotunheim was a living thing, sharp as broken glass, relentless as the ocean tide. Each gust clawed at armor and skin alike, carrying the bitter scent of ice older than the 9 realms themselves. Thor, Sif, Baldur, and Loki stood at the edge of a sheer cliff, looking down into a valley so deep it seemed carved by the hand of Ymir himself. In the center of that valley, bathed in ghostly blue light, loomed Thrymheim, the fortress of the Frost Giant King. The gates were monstrous slabs of ice, each the height of a mountain face, reinforced with chains thicker than a long ship's mast. Frostfire torches burned on the walls, their eerie flames casting shadows that writhed like serpents. Sif adjusted her grip on her spear. "How do you propose we enter that without being frozen to statues?" Loki smirked, brushing snow from his shoulders. "I told you, I have a way." You'll just need to trust me." Thor grunted. "That's what worries me." As they descended into the valley, Loki's plan became clear. Rather than approach directly, he led them toward a narrow chasm on the fortress's north side, where jagged spires of ice rose like teeth. At its center was a frozen archway, half buried in snow. "This," Loki said, brushing aside the frost, "is the Forgotten Gate, built long before Thrym took the throne. The frost giants sealed it, believing no one could break the wards." Baldur examined the runes etched into the ice. "These aren't giant magic. This is older, Vanir magic." Loki grinned. "Precisely, which means," he tapped the surface lightly, and the runes flared to life. "It can be opened by someone clever enough to twist its meaning." The ice shuddered, groaning like a living creature. A crack split the surface, and a thin beam of pale light spilled through. But before the gate could fully open, the ground trembled. From the snowdrifts rose 3 massive figures, frost sentinels, their bodies sculpted from living ice, their eyes burning like shards of winter sun. Sif readied her spear, Baldur drew his sword, and Thor's grip on Mjölnir tightened. Loki sighed dramatically. "I did say this might draw attention." The first sentinel roared, the sound echoing through the valley like an avalanche. Thor stepped forward, electricity crackling along Mjölnir's surface. "Then let's make sure we're heard," he growled. The battle began. Lightning clashed against ice, steel against frost, the sound carrying up to the looming fortress above where, high upon the battlements, King Thrym himself watched, the Veilfang at his side, a cold smile on his face. Chapter 23, The Battle at the Forgotten Gate. The first sentinel lunged forward, its massive arm of jagged ice swinging down with the force of a collapsing glacier. Thor met the blow head-on, Mjölnir crashing into the icy limb. The shock wave split the ground, sending shards of frost into the air. The second sentinel tried to flank them, its steps thundering against the frozen earth. But Sif was already there, swift and deadly. She ducked beneath a sweeping strike, her spear flashing like a streak of sunlight. With a single, precise thrust, she pierced the sentinel's knee, sending spiderweb cracks racing up its leg. "Keep it busy," Baldur shouted, his sword singing as it struck the sentinel's other leg. The giant collapsed to one knee, howling in a sound like a storm's death cry. Meanwhile, Loki danced between shadows, his movements unpredictable. He wasn't built for brute force, he fought with precision and deception. He darted toward the third sentinel, tossing a small, rune-marked stone into the air. The moment it touched the ice creature's chest, it exploded in a burst of emerald light, melting deep into its core. The creature staggered, steam hissing from the wound. "A gift from the dwarves," Loki said with a smirk. But the first sentinel, still standing, roared and slammed both fists into the ground. The resulting quake threw them all off balance, and the Forgotten Gate's fragile runes flickered dangerously. "We need to finish this now," Baldur barked. Thor's eyes narrowed. He leaped into the air, lightning wrapping around him like a storm given form. Mjölnir spun in his grip before he hurled it directly into the sentinel's chest. The impact shattered the creature into 1,000 shards that fell like deadly hail. Sif and Baldur finished the second sentinel together, their blades and spear striking in perfect rhythm until the giant cracked apart. Loki's target was already on its knees. The rune bomb having done its work, he simply gave it a mocking bow before it collapsed entirely. When the last shard of ice fell silent, the air grew still. Only the faint hum of the runes at the Forgotten Gate remained. Thor landed heavily beside them, frost steaming from his armor. "No more distractions," he said. Loki touched the runes once more, and this time they blazed with full power. The ice split open, revealing a dark tunnel beyond a direct path into Thrymheim. Above, in the fortress, King Thrym's cold smile widened. He had wanted them to enter, and now they had. Chapter 24. Into the heart of Thrymheim. The air inside the tunnel was colder than the frozen plains outside. It was not the biting cold of wind and ice, it was the still, suffocating chill of a tomb sealed for centuries. The walls were carved from ancient glacial stone, etched with runes that pulsed faintly as if whispering to one another. Thor's breath came in white clouds, but his grip on Mjölnir was steady. "Stay alert," he muttered. "The frost giants know these tunnels better than we ever will." Loki's voice echoed softly behind him. "Oh, I'm counting on it." Nothing makes a predator more careless than believing it owns the hunting ground. He traced a finger over one of the glowing runes, his eyes narrowing. "These are not just decorations, they're warnings." Baldur frowned. Warnings of what? Before Loki could answer, the tunnel widened into a massive cavern, and the ground beneath their boots shifted with a low rumble. From the shadows, hulking shapes emerged, frost giant warriors in heavy armor, their eyes glinting like shards of frozen moonlight. Each carried weapons forged from black ice, colder than death itself. At the far end of the cavern, upon a throne of jagged glacier, sat King Thrym. His presence filled the space like an avalanche ready to fall. His beard was rimed with frost, his crown formed from spears of ice, and across his lap rested a colossal axe glowing with runic power. "Thor Odinson," Thrym's voice boomed, deep and resonant, rolling like distant thunder through the ice. "And the trickster Loki, I have been expecting you." Sif's grip on her spear tightened. "Then you know why we've come." Thrym's cold smile widened. "Ooh, I know. You seek Mjölnir, and yet you walk willingly into my hall. You think you are the hunters here." He rose from his throne, towering over them all. "You are the prey." The frost giant warriors advanced in perfect formation, their boots crunching on the icy floor. Thor raised Mjölnir, lightning sparking along its head. "Then let's see if your prey can bite back." The cavern erupted into chaos, lightning clashing against black ice, steel ringing out in the frozen dark. Baldur's sword carved arcs of blinding light, shattering enemy shields. Sif fought with precision, her spear darting faster than the giants could follow. Loki, meanwhile, slipped through the fray like a shadow, his daggers striking at weak points in the giant's armor. Thrym watched the battle for a moment, then stepped down from his throne, the weight of his axe cracking the ice beneath his feet. "Enough games," he rumbled. "Come to me, Thunderer." Thor met his gaze, their rivalry stretching back through countless battles. With a roar, he charged, then the floor shook as the two titans collided. Chapter 25. The Duel of Storm and Ice. The clash of Thor and Thrym shook the cavern like the cracking of a mountain's heart. Mjölnir met the frost giant's ruined axe in an explosion of lightning and ice shards, each blow ringing with the power of the gods. Thor's arms strained as he pushed forward, muscles coiled with raw fury. "Return my hammer," he growled, though the weapon was already in his grip. His demand was for honor, for balance, for vengeance against Thrym's insult to Asgard. Thrym's booming laughter echoed off the icy walls. "Return it. I will bury it and you beneath this glacier for eternity." With a mighty swing, his axe carved through the air. releasing a shockwave of freezing wind that sent cracks, spiderwebbing, across the cavern floor. Thor planted his feet, lightning sparking along Mjölnir's head. I've fought frost before, giant, and frost always melts in the storm. He hurled the hammer, its path a streak of blinding light. Thrym blocked it with his axe, the impact sending both of them sliding backward, gouging deep grooves into the frozen ground. Around them, the battle-raged boulders soared, danced with radiant arcs, cutting down giants, while Sif's spear moved like a silver serpent, striking true again and again. Loki, ever the opportunist, was nowhere near. The fight vanished into the shadows, his next scheme already in motion. Thrym roared and leaped forward, his massive frame moving with terrifying speed. Thor met him head-on, Mjölnir and axe colliding in a blinding burst of power. The cavern's ceiling trembled, icicles raining down like deadly spears. With each strike, Thor's lightning burned through the frost that coated Thrym's armor, revealing scars from battles long past. But Thrym was no ordinary foe. He channeled the ancient cold of Jotunheim, his strikes growing heavier, colder, threatening to numb Thor's limbs. Then came the moment. Thor caught Thrym's axe on Mjölnir's head and twisted, wrenching it free from the giant's grip. With a roar that shook the world, he swung upward, lightning engulfing the hammer, and struck Thrym square in the chest. The impact hurled the Frost King across the cavern, smashing him into his own throne of ice, which shattered into 1,000 glittering shards. Silence fell, broken only by the crackle of Thor's lightning. Thrym slumped forward, beaten but still breathing. Thor stood over him, Mjölnir in hand. "Stay down, Thrym. Next time, there will be no mercy." But the frost giant's lips curved into a faint smile. "You think this is over, Thunderer? The storm you bring will awaken something far worse." Before Thor could demand more, the ice beneath Thrym's body glowed with runes, and in a flash of freezing light, the Frost King vanished, leaving behind only the echo of his warning. Chapter 26: The Giant's Ominous Prophecy. The cavern still trembled from the echo of Thor's final strike, but now silence pressed heavily upon the gods. Thrym was gone, vanished in a burst of ancient magic. His final words lingered like frost in their minds. Thor tightened his grip on Mjölnir, lightning still dancing faintly across its surface. "He fled like a coward," he muttered, but Sif placed a hand on his arm, her gaze wary. "No, it was not cowardice. That was something else. He wanted us to hear that warning." Baldur, his armor gleaming with faint light even in the cavern's gloom, nodded. "A prophecy, perhaps. Giants do not speak such words idly. If Thrym foresaw a greater storm, we must take heed." Thor scowled. "I've crushed countless frost giants. What more could he summon that I could not destroy?" Yet, even as he spoke, doubt flickered in his storm-blue eyes. Then, from the shadows, came Loki. He had reappeared, as silently as he had vanished, his smile sharp as a blade. "Ah, my noble brother in arms," Loki said smoothly. "You strike, you roar, you win, but always you forget that battles are not fought only with weapons. Words can wound as deeply as steel, and warnings, if ignored, become chains." Thor's eyes narrowed. "Speak plainly, trickster, before I smash that grin from your face." Loki tilted his head, unbothered by the threat. "Very well." Thrym spoke of something worse than himself. That could mean only one thing: he is no longer acting alone. There are forces in Jotunheim, ancient and patient, who have been waiting for a spark. You, Thor, may have just given them one. A hush fell over the group. The broken throne of ice loomed behind them, glistening with strange runes that pulsed faintly, as if alive. Baldur stepped closer, running his fingers across the symbols. These are older than Thrym, older even than the last war between Asgard and Jotunheim. They speak of a chain unbroken, a beast unbound. The words chilled even Thor's blood. He glanced at Loki, whose smile widened. "Yes," Loki whispered. "I know of what he speaks. The beast that devours hope. The shadow of Ragnarok itself. If Thrym awakens it, then even the hammer in your hand may not be enough." Sif's spear tip clattered softly against the ground as she asked, "What beast? What lies beneath these words?" But Loki only smirked and turned away, his cloak rippling like a flame in the cold air. "Perhaps you'll see soon enough." At that moment, the cavern shook violently, as though the mountain itself groaned in its sleep. Cracks split across the icy walls, releasing gusts of freezing wind. From deep below came a low, guttural growlinant, endless and filled with hunger. The gods froze. Even Thor felt the sound rumble in his chest. It was not Thrym. It was not any frost giant. It was something older. Baldur's voice was grim. "The prophecy has begun." Thor raised Mjölnir, lightning roaring once more. "Then let it come," he said. "Storm or beast, I'll strike it down all the same." But in the depths of the earth, the growl grew louder, echoing like the heartbeat of a monster that had been waiting for millennia to awaken. Chapter 27. Shadows stir in Jotunheim. The gods left the cavern of Thrym, with Mjölnir blazing like a star in Thor's grasp. Yet though the hammer was recovered, victory felt hollow. Every gust of wind carried with it the memory of Thrym's ominous words, and the echo of that monstrous growl still haunted their hearts. As they crossed the frost-ridden plains of Jotunheim, the land itself seemed changed. The snow was darker now, stained by shadows that twisted and writhed like living serpents. The mountains, once silent and still, groaned as though they bore the weight of ancient memories awakening. Sif tightened her grip on her spear. "This is not the Jotunheim we knew." The land recoils, as if the giant's realm itself is stirring. Baldur's bright eyes swept across the horizon. The balance is shifting. Thrym was not lying. Something older than him has begun to wake. Thor snarled, his breath steaming in the bitter air. "Let it wake, then. I will crush it as I crushed him." But Loki, walking a few paces behind, laughed softly, a laugh that grated like ice breaking. "Oh, my dear Thor," Loki drawled, "you truly believe your hammer is enough for all things, don't you? But tell me, what if the enemy is not one you can strike? What if it is the darkness creeping through the very veins of this land? Will you smash the wind? Will you wrestle shadows?" Thor glared at him, but Sif spoke before his rage could burst. "Enough, Loki. If you know more of this, speak. We cannot fight what we do not understand." Loki's smile widened. "Very well. You recall, do you not, the whispers of an ancient pact? When the first giants were born, before Odin carved the 9 realms from Ymir's corpse, there were beings that slumbered even deeper than Jotunheim's roots. Old powers, old gods, some say older than even the Allfather himself. They were sealed away when Asgard rose, their names forgotten, but not erased." The air grew colder with his words. Even Baldur's light seemed dimmer. "And Thrym," Loki continued, his eyes glittering with cruel delight in his desperation, "may have sought them. Perhaps he was not king of the giants at all, but a servant to something far greater." As if to answer, the earth beneath their feet rumbled. From the north, A storm began to form, not of wind and snow, but of black fire and ash. Shapes moved within it, massive and formless, like titans walking just beyond sight. The sound of their steps thundered across the plains. Sif gasped. "What are they?" Baldur's voice was grim. "The shadows of what Loki speaks. Forgotten powers, clothed in storms. They should not be here. They should never awaken." Thor's grip tightened on Mjölnir. Sparks of lightning burst across the sky, his fury answering the storm. "Then we make certain they do not awaken fully. With my hammer, I will shatter them before they rise." Loki tilted his head, amused. "Oh, Thor, you always rush forward. But beware, strike too hard, and you may be the very one to break the chains holding them back." As the gods argued, the storm of shadows grew closer, swallowing the horizon. A deep, guttural chant rose from within, a chorus of voices that seemed to come from the bones of the world itself. The very air trembled with the sound. The gods fell silent, staring into the darkness. It was not merely a storm. It was a summoning, and somewhere in its depths, a pair of glowing eyes opened, vast, ancient, and filled with hunger. Chapter 28. Loki's Deceptive Counsel. The storm of shadows loomed ever closer, its chorus of chants shaking the very marrow of the gods. Each syllable seemed carved from an age before creation, older than the 9 realms themselves. The air reeked of ash and venom. Even the snow beneath their feet blackened as though scorched by an unseen fire. Thor raised Mjölnir high, lightning spiraling outward in a shield of crackling blue. "Enough of this witchcraft. I'll scatter these phantoms with my hammer and send them back into the pit they crawled from." But before he could strike, Loki stepped swiftly between him and the storm. His hands lifted as if to hold back both Thor's rage and the approaching darkness. His sly smile did not waver, though the reflection of the storm's monstrous eyes flickered within his own. "Thor, dear brother," Loki drawled, his voice as smooth as silk over ice. "Brute force is not the answer this time. If you lash out blindly, you'll tear open the veil completely and unleash whatever festers inside. Then, not even your hammer could save us." Sif's voice was sharp. "And what would you suggest, trickster?" "Words against shadows. You speak of cunning, but I see only delay." Loki's smirk deepened. "Oh Sif, you wound me. You forget that trickery is not just lies, it is survival. The storm is not yet fully awake. The chains of old still bind it. But the chant we hear is a summoning, and it needs a key." Baldur frowned. "A key?" "Yes," Loki said, turning his gaze to the others with unsettling calm. "The old powers are bound by runes Odin himself etched when he carved order from chaos. If someone were to disrupt the chant, misguide the ritual, twist the words, then the awakening could be halted, even reversed." Thor growled, glaring at him. "And you would be the one to do this trickery." Loki placed a hand dramatically on his chest. "Who else, my thunderous oaf? None among you can weave lies like I. I can mimic the voices of giants, bend the runes to sing false meanings. With enough time, I could convince even the shadows themselves to return to slumber." Sif narrowed her eyes. "Or lead them against us." The accusation hung in the air like a blade. For a moment, even the storm seemed to pause, as if eager to hear Loki's answer. The trickster only laughed, his voice carrying a mocking lilt. "Ah, Sif, always so quick to see betrayal. But consider this, if the shadows awaken, they devour all. Giants, gods, mortals, no one is spared. Even I would be swallowed. So, Do you not see? For once, our fates are bound together. My survival is your survival. Baldur studied him carefully, the light in his eyes probing for truth. At last, he spoke softly. He is right, at least in part. The danger is too great for mistrust. If Loki can mislead the ritual, then perhaps the storm can be stalled. Thor's knuckles tightened around Mjölnir, but at last he lowered the hammer. Those sparks still danced along its head. Very well, Loki. But if you betray us by the 9 realms, I'll smash you into dust. Loki gave a mocking bow, his grin gleaming like a knife in the dark. Oh, how reassuring. Without further word, he stepped forward, walking alone into the blackened snow toward the wall of shadows. His figure seemed to shrink against the enormity of the storm, until he was no more than a flickering silhouette. The gods watched as Loki raised his arms, his voice weaving through the howling chants. At first, it was a whisper, then a hiss, then a booming cry that matched the rhythm of the storm itself. The shadows wavered, their great forms rippling as though confused. Baldur whispered, "He's rewriting their song." But Thor's brow furrowed, or twisting it to his own ends. The air thickened. The chant grew jagged, broken by Loki's interference. The storm of shadows roared in fury, their voices clashing, unraveling, uncertain. For a heartbeat, it seemed Loki had succeeded, until the eyes in the storm flared brighter, searing through the darkness. A voice deeper than mountains thundered, "Trickster, we know you." The ground split open. A claw of molten shadow surged upward, reaching for Loki. The trickster laughed, even as the darkness closed around him. "Ah, so you remember me. How flattering." And with that, the storm swallowed him whole. The gods cried out, but the storm's chant suddenly fell silent, as though it were holding its breath. The land froze in terrible stillness. Had Loki deceived the shadows, or had the shadows deceived Loki? Chapter 29. The Hammer's Burden. The silence that followed Loki's disappearance was more dreadful than the storm's roar. The gods stood frozen, their breath caught in the cold night air. The wall of shadows loomed above them, yet its chant was broken, fractured into whispers that slithered like serpents through the wind. Thor's grip on Mjölnir tightened until his knuckles went white. He stared at the void where Loki had been swallowed, his chest heaving with both rage and helplessness. For all his bluster, for all his thunder, he had stood and watched as his brother trickster, though he was, had been dragged into the storm. Sif broke the silence first. "We should leave him. He chose his path, as he always has. Loki plays with serpents and fire. Let him be burned." But Baldur shook his head, his voice solemn. "No, Sif. Whatever Loki intended, his interference disrupted the ritual. Without him, the storm would already have consumed us. He bought us time, though at what cost, we cannot yet know." Thor's jaw clenched. Time is not enough. If he's still alive in there, the shadows will twist him, use him. And if he is lost, he lifted Mjölnir slightly, the hammer glowing with a restless fury. "Then it falls to me to end what he began." The Frost Giant Ymir's kin-silent allies, who had lingered in the distance, murmured uneasily among themselves. One stepped forward, a towering figure with ice for skin and eyes like frozen moons. "God of thunder," the giant rumbled, "your hammer carries not only your strength but the weight of the 9 realms. If you strike blindly into the storm, the veil between worlds may shatter. Do you bear that burden?" Thor glared upward at the shifting shadows, the question clawing at his heart. For all his life, he had wielded Mjölnir as the answer to every challenge hammer the shield. Hammer, the weapon. Hammer, the judge. But here, the hammer was more than steel and storm. It was a fulcrum, a key to balance or destruction. Sif's voice was sharp, though softer than before. Thor, if you bring your rage down upon this storm, you may awaken what Loki tried to bind. Remember the prophecy. Mjölnir is not just a Hamarit, is the doom and salvation of the gods. Baldur stepped closer, placing a hand on Thor's arm. Brother, the choice is not whether to wield it, but how. A hammer can crush, but it can also shape. You must strike with purpose, not wrath. That is the burden. Thor's chest rose and fell like a forge's bellows. For a moment, the storm's whispers seemed to mock him, hissing his doubts. Too rash, too foolish, too late. He raised Mjölnir high, lightning dancing wildly across the dark sky. The gods tensed, fearing he would strike with reckless fury. But instead, Thor pressed the hammer against the ground. The earth trembled. Thunder rolled not as a roar of war, but as a steady drumbeat, echoing through the 9 realms. The hammer glowed brighter, its runes igniting one by one until they formed a circle of light around the gods. The shadows recoiled, their whispers turning into shrieks. The claw that had dragged Loki into the abyss twitched and faltered as though burned by the radiance. Thor's voice bellowed across the storm, not in anger but in command. By Mjölnir's might, I bind you. By Thunder's law, I halt you. No power shall cross the veil unless it bears the truth of the storm. The light spread outward, holding back the storm's advance. For the first time, the gods felt the shadows weaken. But the victory was not without price. Thor staggered, sweat beading on his brow, his strength draining into the hammer. The weight of all 9 realms pressed upon his shoulders, and he nearly fell to his knees. Sif rushed to his side, steadying him. Thor, you cannot bear this alone. Yet Thor's gaze was fixed on the void where Loki had vanished. His voice was strained, but resolute. He is still in there. I feel it. If I falter, both he and we are lost. This is my burden. Mjölnir's burden. Baldur's eyes shone with a strange light. Then we must be your strength, Thor. For if one hammer bears the storm, the gods must bear the hammer. They placed their hands upon Thor's shoulders, forming a circle of unity. Together, their will flowed into the lightning, their voices joining his. The storm shrieked louder, retreating inch by inch, but not defeated. And deep within its heart, a flicker of laughter, Loki's laughter, echoed faintly, twisted yet alive. Thor's burden was not just the hammer. It was the choice of whether to save his brother or to wield Mjölnir against him. Chapter 30. The Price of Shadows. The circle of light around the gods trembled, as though it were a fragile shield against an endless sea. Thor's knees nearly buckled, sweat dripping down his face as the hammer grew heavier with every heartbeat. Each rune that burned on Mjölnir demanded more of him blood strength. But still, he held on. The storm writhed in fury, its whispers now swelling into screams. Through the chaos, a shape began to emerge in the heart of the darkness. At first, it was formless, a shifting mass of smoke and teeth. But slowly, it twisted into something more dreadful, a reflection of Loki himself. Brother, Thor whispered, tightening his grip on the hammer. The figure laughed, though it was not the laugh they knew. It was jagged, broken, echoing with 1,000 voices. Thor, 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 you would tear the storm apart from me, foolish. The trickster needs no saving. Baldur's eyes narrowed, his hand resting on the hilt of his shining blade. That is, no brother. The shadows have bound him. But Thor shook his head. He could feel something beneath the storm's venom, a spark of mischief that was not cruel, not hollow, but real. Loki's spark. The shadow form stepped closer, its eyes glowing green, its grin stretching too wide. The price is heavy, Thunderer. To pull me free, you must give what even you cannot reclaim. What will you pay? The hammer quivered in Thor's hand, as if answering the question itself. Sif spoke sharply, her voice cutting through the wind. Do not listen, Thor. Shadows bargain, only to bind tighter. Strike it down, and be done with this madness. But Baldur's voice was softer, mournful. Every chain has a key, Sif. Perhaps this shadow is Loki's chain. If he is lost, the cost may still be less than letting him become the storm's weapon. The shadow Loki spread its arms wide, mockingly. Yes, yes, strike me down. Prove to the storm you are but a hammer that smashes and nothing more. Or, prove me wrong, brother. Pay the price. Bear the burden. Save me, if you dare. Thor's heart thundered, louder than the storm itself. Memories rushed upon him of Loki's jests in Odin's hall, of battles fought side by side, of betrayals and forgiveness, of a bond neither god nor. Slowly, he lowered Mjölnir, not in surrender, but in decision. The hammer bears my strength, but my strength is not enough, Thor said, his voice raw. If a price must be paid, then let it be mine alone. Not the 9 realms, mine. He pressed his forehead against the hammer, whispering words that had not crossed his lips since boyhood, an oath older than war, older than kings. Lightning leaped from his body into Mjölnir, and the glow expanded, filling the storm with blinding radiance. The shadow Loki screamed, writhing as the light seared through it. For a moment, it looked as if it would shatter into smoke, but then, from within, another voice rang out. Thor? It was Loki's voice, weak but true. The real Loki, caught in chains of shadow, crying out not in mockery, but in desperation. Thor roared, lifting the hammer high, despite the crushing weight. Then let the storm take from me what it will, but you will not have my brother. He brought Mjölnir down with all the force of the heavens. The light exploded, ripping through the storm in a tidal wave of thunder. The gods shielded their eyes, the ground shaking beneath their feet. When the brilliance faded, the storm was not gone, but diminished, fractured, its whispers scattered to the winds. And there, lying broken on the earth, was Loki. His body was pale, his breath shallow, his eyes flickering open with a weak grin. You really are an idiot, brother. Thor dropped to his knees beside him, the hammer slipping from his grasp, smoking with exhaustion. And you are still alive. That is enough. But Baldur's face was grave. He pointed to the hammer, its runes now dimmed, some cracked. Thor, the price has been paid, but not fully. The storm is not gone, it waits. And Mjölnir, it will never be the same. The burden Thor had taken was not just to save Loki, it was to bear the storm's hunger, to carry its shadow within the hammer itself. The gods looked upon him in silence, knowing the truth. The battle was won, but the war was only delayed, and the true price of shadows had yet to be revealed. Chapter 31. The Shattered Hammer. The air hung heavy after the storm's retreat, thick with the smell of burnt earth and ozone. Silence pressed upon the gods, broken only by Loki's faint breaths and the slow crackle of dying thunder in the sky. Thor sat on one knee, his hands trembling as he reached for Yet when his fingers brushed the haft, the hammer felt different, colder, heavier, as though it no longer recognized him fully. The runes carved into its head, once brilliant with celestial fire, now glimmered weakly. A jagged fracture split the stone like a scar across its heart. Sif's gasp broke the silence. "By the roots of Yggdrasil, Thor, what have you done to it?" Baldur stepped forward, his gaze grim. "He has not broken it alone. The storm's shadow has marked Mjölnir. This is not the hammer as we knew it. The weapon of Asgard is wounded." Thor clenched his jaw, lifting the hammer. Even that simple act, once effortless, now strained his muscles. "Better the hammer bear the wound than my brother," he muttered. Loki coughed, forcing a grin despite his weakness. "Ah, always so noble. Yet, I cannot decide what is more shocking, that you risked everything to save me, or that Mjölnir itself has cracked. Imagine Odin's face when he sees it. Priceless." Sif glared at him. "Do not mock this, trickster. Without the hammer hole, Asgard's shield is broken." But Loki's grin faded when he saw Thor's eyes. There was no triumph in them, no relief, only the weight of a burden no warrior should bear. Thor stood, his voice steady but low. "The storm is not gone. I feel it, whispering, still within the hammer. It stirs even now, testing its chains. Each time I raise Mjölnir, I will hear it calling. If I falter, it will not hesitate to consume me." Baldur placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then you must not bear this burden alone. We will find a way to cleanse it, to mend what has been broken." But Thor shook his head. "No forge in the 9 realms can mend such a wound. Not even the dwarves who forged it could restore what has been lost." He looked toward the horizon, where the last shadows of the storm drifted. "The hammer is not just broken, it has become something else, a vessel of light and shadow both." The gods fell into uneasy silence. Each knew what it meant. A weapon tainted by darkness might not remain loyal forever. Loki, still weak, sat up with effort. "Then perhaps it is time we ask not how to mend the hammer, but how to use it as it is. Shadows can be turned, twisted, redirected. Who better than me to teach you that, brother?" Sif's voice was sharp. "No, enough of your tricks. You have brought us to this brink already." But Baldur raised a hand. "Sif, perhaps he is not wrong. The storm will not wait for us to be ready. If it returns stronger, Thor must learn to wield both light and shadow, or Asgard will fall." Thor looked down at Mjölnir, the fracture glowing faintly as if alive. The thought of wielding not just the hammer's thunder, but also the storm's hunger, chilled him. Yet he knew the truth. If he could not master it, it would master him. For the first time in his life, Thor, god of thunder, breaker of giants, defender of Asgard, felt the creeping edge of doubt. The hammer had been his strength, his certainty. Now it was a question, one he might not be able to answer. Loki's weak laughter drifted through the air. "Well, brother, it seems fate has given us a new jest. You saved me, but now your hammer may destroy you." How very poetic. Thor tightened his grip on the cracked weapon, his voice like distant thunder. "Then let fate laugh, if it will. I will not yield. Not to the storm, not to shadow, not to despair. Mjölnir is mine, broken or whole. And if the storm wishes to test me again, let it come." But deep inside, he knew the truth. The storm would come, and when it did, the shattered hammer might decide the fate of gods and realms alike. Chapter 32. The Trickster's Council. The hall of Asgard was heavy with unease. Word of Mjölnir's fracture had already spread among the gods, whispered like a curse that grew darker with every retelling. Warriors, who once found courage at the sight of Thor's hammer, now looked upon it with doubt in their eyes. Thor, seated at the long table, kept the weapon close. The jagged crack glowed faintly, even in the torchlight, pulsing as though the storm's heart beat inside it. He had not slept since the battle. Every time he closed his eyes, the storm whispered to him promises of power, visions of destruction. Loki appeared at his side, walking with a limp, but smiling, as though nothing troubled him. "Brother," he said, his tone light, "you sit here glowering at your cup, as though it insulted you. Perhaps I should teach it some manners." Thor did not look at him. "Speak plainly, Loki. I know why you've come. Do you?" Loki leaned on the table, his sharp eyes glinting. "Because what I see is not the mighty Thor, breaker of mountains, but a man afraid of his own shadow. And that shadow now lives inside your hammer." Thor's hand tightened on the haft of Mjölnir. "It is poison. I will resist it. Resist it." Loki chuckled. "Tell me, when has resistance ever served you well? You are a hammer, Thor, and a hammer does not resist it, strikes. You cannot fight the shadow by denying it. You must learn to guide it, to bend it." Sif, seated nearby, slammed her fist upon the table. "Enough of your poison-tongued tricks. Thor should not listen to you. It was your schemes that brought the storm upon us to begin with." Loki's smile widened. "Ah, Sif, always the sharp blade. But even you must see the truth. The hammer is changed. Thor cannot wield it as he once did. If he tries, it will consume him. Better he learns to hold the reins than be dragged behind the horse." Baldur, calm as ever, intervened. "Loki speaks half-truths, as always. Yet in half-truths there can be wisdom. Thor, what if you were to learn the storm's language, not to submit, but to command? Could that not turn danger into strength?" Thor's gaze lingered on the crack in Mjölnir. "And if in learning its tongue, I forget my own? If, in commanding the storm, I become it?" Loki's eyes gleamed with mischief, but his voice softened. "Then perhaps you need a guide. Someone who has walked in shadow all his life. Someone who knows how to dance with darkness without letting it swallow him." Sif's voice dripped with scorn. "You mean yourself?" "Of course I do," Loki replied, with mock modesty. "Who else but me could teach the god of thunder how to lie to his own weapon?" Thor finally turned to face him. "And why would you help me?" "Out of love for your brother." Loki's grin faltered, just for a heartbeat. Then he laughed. "Out of love? Hardly. But think of it this way. If the storm devours you, who will I have left to torment? No, Thor, I need you alive. Alive and dangerous." The hall fell silent. Even Sif had no ready reply. For though Loki's words were laced with jest, there was truth in them. Thor leaned forward, his voice low. "If I accept your counsel, it will not be to indulge your games. You will teach me how to master this shadow, but if I see the faintest sign that you seek to twist it for yourself, I will end it." Loki bowed with exaggerated flourish. A fair bargain. The thunder god and the trickster, bound together by a crack in the sky. What could possibly go wrong? Baldur's calm voice broke the tension. "Then it is decided. Loki will guide you, Thor. But know this, the line between master and servant is thin. Should you falter, the storm will seize its chance." Thor rose, lifting the fractured hammer. The glow of the crack pulsed like a heartbeat in the dark. He met Loki's eyes and spoke with grim resolve. "Then let us begin, brother. Teach me your counsel, and may the Norns themselves weep at what comes of it." And, in that moment, the strange alliance was forged, thunder and trickery, light and shadow. An alliance that might save the 9 realms, or doom them all. Chapter 33. Shadows in the Forge. The path to Nidavellir wound deep into the roots of Yggdrasil, where no sunlight touched, and the air grew heavy with the heat of the world's heart. Thor and Loki descended together, the fractured Mjölnir wrapped in thick cloth to keep its glow from drawing unwanted eyes. Every few steps, the faint pulse of the crack throbbed through the wrappings, like a living thing struggling to break free. The clang of hammers greeted them as they entered the dwarven forge. Sparks flew like fireflies across the cavern, and the air was filled with the scent of molten iron and burning coal. Brokkr, the master smith, was the first to notice them. His eyes narrowed as he caught sight of Thor. "You bring ruin into my hall," Brokkr growled, pointing at the wrapped hammer. "I feel its corruption from here." Sindri, ever calmer than his brother, stepped forward. "Thor, what has happened to Mjölnir?" Thor unwrapped the hammer, and at once the forge dimmed. The crack along Mjölnir's head glowed with unnatural darkness, like a wound-bleeding shadow. The dwarves recoiled, muttering prayers under their breath. "It is broken," Thor admitted, his voice heavy. "And worse, it has been poisoned by the storm. I ask for your aid in reforging it." Brokkr spat on the ground. "There are things that should not be mended. That weapon reeks of something older than even the giant's malice. Darkness clings to it like rot. You'd do better to bury it in the heart of a mountain and leave it there." But Loki stepped forward, his tongue sharp as ever. "Ah, Brokkr, always so dramatic. If Thor buries his hammer, who will defend the 9 realms when chaos rises? You, with your hammer and tongs." The dwarf's face turned red, but Sindri raised his hand to silence him. "Enough, brother. Thor has come for aid, and it is not lightly that he does so. If Mjölnir is to be reforged, it must be done here. But know this, Thor, to mend what is broken, the hammer must first be tested in fire, and not just any fire. It must be plunged into the eternal forge, where flames are fed by the roots of Yggdrasil itself." Loki's eyes gleamed. "And what happens when we thrust a shadow into such fire, I wonder? Will it burn away, or be tempered into something far more dangerous?" Thor said nothing, though unease flickered across his face. The dwarves prepared the forge, stoking the flames until they roared like a living beast. Thor placed Mjölnir upon the anvil, and even the metal beneath it groaned as though protesting its presence. As Brokkr lifted his hammer to strike, the crack in Mjölnir flared. A shadow spilled out, slithering across the forge like smoke made solid. The dwarves staggered back, their faces pale. It whispered, not in words that any mortal tongue could speak, but in sounds that clawed at the mind, promises, threats, visions of endless storm. Thor alone stood firm, though his knuckles whitened as he gripped the handle. Loki, however, smiled as though he had been expecting it. "Do you hear it, Thor?" he murmured, leaning close. "It speaks to you because it knows you. The storm craves its master. You must answer it not with fear, but with command." Thor gritted his teeth. "If I answer it, it will consume me." "Not if I teach you how to lie," Loki whispered. "Lie to the storm, Thor. Let it think you are yielding, even as you bind it." The shadows writhed, stretching toward Thor like grasping hands. For a heartbeat, the thunder god felt the pull of something vast and endless, a hunger that could swallow all 9 realms. His breath caught in his chest. Then he lifted Mjölnir and slammed it down upon the anvil. The shadow shrieked as sparks erupted, fire and darkness colliding in a violent storm. The dwarves chanted, their voices rising above the chaos, binding the forge with runes of protection. Sindri's voice rang out. "One more strike, Thor." Bind it now, or it will break free forever." Thor raised the hammer high, but even as he did, he saw Loki's reflection in the polished metal of the forge smiling, his eyes alight with secrets. In that instant, Thor knew, whatever came of this reforging, it would not only shape the fate of Mjölnir, it would shape the fate of his soul. With a roar like thunder, he brought the hammer down. The forge exploded in light and shadow, and Mjölnir was reborn. Chapter 34. The first trial of the new Mjölnir. When the firestorm in the forge finally died, silence fell heavy over Nî. The dwarves, covered in soot and sweat, stared at the anvil where Mjölnir now lay. No longer cracked, no longer bleeding, shadows, it gleamed with a strange, unsettling brilliance. The metal seemed darker than before, as though forged not only from but from the memory of storm and night itself. Thor reached for it, his hand trembling. The handle felt heavier, alive, as though something deep within the hammer was breathing. When he lifted it, the forge shook. Sparks of lightning leaped from its head, but mingled among them danced threads of black flame shadows, entwined with thunder. Sindri's voice was grave. "It is reforged, but it is not the same. Mjölnir carries fire and shadow, both now. Thor, the hammer will test you, as much as you test it." Loki leaned casually against the forge wall, smiling as though the chaos had been a game. "Tests are good. A weapon without challenge is only a toy. And I doubt our Thor wants a toy." Thor ignored him. He tightened his grip and felt the hammer's weight settle into his arm. Yet, there was resistance, like an untamed beast pulling against its reins. "The hammer must be tried," Brokkr growled. "A weapon such as this cannot leave our halls unproven. We will see whether it obeys its master or destroys him." The dwarves led Thor and Loki to the testing ground. A vast cavern where molten rivers of metal flowed like fiery veins through the stone. Colossal targets crafted of enchanted steel and stone stood along the walls, made for testing the gods' weapons. Thor stepped forward. His chest swelled with unease, though he masked it with determination. He raised and lightning crackled, shadows coiled. He hurled it at the nearest target. The hammer struck with a sound like a mountain splitting. The target exploded, not only shattered by thunder, but also corroded by black fire that ate through steel like acid. The cavern shook, and dwarves stumbled backward. One cried out, "By the roots of it burns with venom." Thor recalled the hammer, but when it returned, it resisted his pull, as though reluctant to obey. His jaw tightened. Again, he swung it, this time toward the river of molten metal. Mjölnir struck the flow, and for an instant the fire bent, away not quenched, but pushed back, as though shadows devoured it. A hiss filled the cavern, and when Thor retrieved the hammer once more, the molten river still writhed unnaturally, its fire tainted by black streaks. Sindri's face was pale. "It is worse than I feared. That shadow within it is no longer merely corruption. It is part of Mjölnir now. It has gained a will, Thor. To wield it, you must master not just your strength, but your spirit." The god of thunder gritted his teeth. He had always been a warrior of action, relying on power and courage. But now, power alone would not suffice. He could feel it's a shadow testing him, whispering that he could destroy not only giants, but gods, mountains, and the world itself. And Loki, ever watching, leaned in with his silver tongue. "You feel it, don't you? The hammer calls to the storm in your blood. It shows you what you could be. Thor, not just a protector, but a ruler. Storm and shadow, fire and fury, all bowing to your will." Thor's heart thundered. His knuckles whitened around the handle. "I will not bow to it," he growled. "I am Thor. It will serve me, or it will break again." He raised the hammer once more, his voice echoing across the cavern. "By thunder and storm, by fire and sky, command you." The hammer shook violently, lightning and shadow colliding, nearly ripping itself from his grip. The dwarves shielded their eyes as blinding light filled the cavern. Thor roared, straining every fiber of his being, until finally slowly, the weapon stilled. When the glow faded, Mjölnir rested in his hand, obedient. Yet Thor knew this was no true victory. It had yielded, yes, but only for now. The true battle lay ahead, not against giants or beasts, but within himself. Sindri bowed his head solemnly. "You have passed the first trial, Thor, but the shadow within Mjölnir will not stop testing you. Every strike, every battle, will be another trial. Fail once, and the hammer may claim you, instead of serving you." Loki's smile widened, though his eyes gleamed with something darker. "Oh, I think this is going to be entertaining." Thor turned away, his grip firm on the weapon. He knew one thing: the reforging of Mjölnir was not the end of his struggle. It was only the beginning. Chapter 35. The Whispering Storm. The night in Nidavellir was unlike any other realm. The forges never truly slept, their flames glowing like the heartbeat of the mountain. But Thor could not rest. He sat alone in the dwarves' hall, Mjölnir beside him, its dark metal gleaming faintly in the firelight. At first, it was only silence. Then came the whispers. They did not come from without, but from within the hammer itself, sliding like serpents into his ears. 1,000 voices, overlapping, echoing, some as soft as a lover's murmur, others as harsh as the crack of thunder. "You are stronger now, too strong to serve lesser gods. Why guard them when you could rule them? Strike once, and the world will kneel." Thor clenched his fists until his knuckles cracked. He had faced giants, dragons, and beasts born of chaos, but nothing like this. It was not an enemy before him, but a storm inside him. The shadows from the hammer stretched across the hall, flickering like black flames. He rose, breathing heavily, and stepped outside. The dwarves, though wary, kept their distance. Even they sensed the storm gathering around him. High above, the cavern roof trembled as if Yggdrasil's roots themselves felt Thor's turmoil. Lightning began to spark at his shoulders, wild and untamed. Then he heard another voice, one that cut sharper than the rest. "Your father doubted you. Odin never trusted you with wisdom, only with war. Why protect his world? Why not claim it as your own?" Thor roared and slammed the hammer to the ground. The earth split, lightning and shadow erupting in a violent storm that shook the mountain to its bones. Dwarves fell to their knees, crying out in fear. From behind him came soft footsteps. "Loki, brother," the trickster said, his tone half amusement, half curiosity. "You're scaring the smiths. And frankly, you're scaring me, which is far more impressive." "Be silent, Loki," Thor growled, his eyes glowing with stormlight. But Loki only smiled, stepping closer, his words sharp and deliberate. "You hear them, don't you? The whispers in the storm. They're not lies, Thor. They're truths you've buried. Odin used you as a weapon. He never saw you as more." Thor turned on him, veins trembling with power. For an instant, the urge to strike Loki surged so fiercely that he nearly lifted the hammer. The shadows wanted it. They begged for it. But then, from deep within, another memory stirred his mother, Frigg, her gentle voice reminding him, "Power without restraint is destruction, my son. The storm must protect, not consume. Thor froze, his chest heaving. Slowly, painfully, he lowered Mjölnir. The whispers did not cease, but they quieted, circling like wolves outside a firelight's edge. Thor wiped the sweat from his brow and looked at Loki with eyes heavy yet resolute. "I will not be their puppet," he said. "Not shadow, not storm, not even you, Loki." For once, Loki did not jest. He studied his brother carefully, a flicker of something unreadable in his gaze. Perhaps admiration, perhaps fear. The cavern winds died, the storm subsided, and silence returned. Yet Thor knew the truth. The battle within had only begun. The hammer would whisper again, each time louder, each time more cunning. And when that day came, it might not be only Thor's fate at stake, but all of Asgard. Chapter 36, The Shadow of Prophecy. The night over Asgard was unnaturally silent. No wind stirred the leaves, no birds sang in the trees of Yggdrasil's roots. Thor stood alone upon the balcony of his great hall, staring into the void of the heavens. In his hand rested Mjölnir, heavy not only with iron and enchantment, but with something far more sinister, an echo of prophecy, a whisper of doom. He could still feel the storm within the hammer. Each strike, each battle, each victory brought him closer to something he did not fully understand. Odin's warnings rang in his ears. "Beware the path of shadow, my son. For even light can be swallowed by the storm." But Thor was not one to shrink from destiny. If the Norns had woven a thread that bound him to destruction, then he would tear their tapestry apart with his own hands. And yet, for the first time in centuries, doubt gnawed at him. Far away, beneath the World Tree, the three Norns sat in their eternal vigil by the well of Ord. Their pale fingers moved endlessly across threads of fate, weaving together the destinies of gods and mortals alike. Ord, the eldest, lifted her hollow eyes toward the stars. "He comes closer," she whispered. Skuld, who saw the future, frowned, and closer still to ruin. Unless what? Verdandi, the middle sister, asked softly. "Unless he learns to wield shadow as he wields lightning. For the storm is not only destruction, it is transformation." Their words drifted across the roots of Yggdrasil, carried on the currents of fate, until they reached the ear of another Loki. In the dim halls of Jotunheim, Loki sat cross-legged, a sly grin curling across his lips. He had listened, unseen and unnoticed, to the whispers of the Norns. Prophecy was a dangerous thing, and he knew better than any god that words of fate could be bent, twisted, or even shattered, if one had the courage or cunning to attempt it. "Thor, my noble brother," Loki murmured, his green eyes gleaming like emerald fire. "You clutch your hammer so tightly, blind to the chains it weaves around you. But perhaps it is I who will guide you, or betray you. The choice has yet to be made." He rose to his feet, the shadows parting before him. For once, even Loki was unsure of his place in this tale. Was he the ally who would help Thor break the storm's curse, or the serpent who would ensure it consumed him? The next day, Thor strode into the council chamber of Asgard, his steps heavy with purpose. Odin, Frigg, Balder, and Heimdall were already waiting. The All-Father's one eye glimmered beneath his hood, sharp and unyielding. "You know why I've called you here," Thor said, his voice echoing against the golden walls. The whispers of prophecy spread. "The Norns speak of storm and shadow. I will not let this doom befall Asgard. Tell me what must be done." Odin leaned forward, resting his hands on Gungnir. "To fight fate is to fight Yggdrasil itself. But there are paths, hidden ones, that may delay what must come. The hammer is changing you, my son. Already, your rage burns hotter, your victories bloodier. If you cannot master it, it will master you. Thor slammed Mjölnir upon the council table, sparks of thunder leaping from the blow. Then, I will master it. I will journey to the Norns themselves and demand answers. The gods exchanged uneasy glances. Even for Thor, it was no small thing to confront the weavers of destiny. Frigg, wise and sorrowful, spoke softly. Be careful, my son. The Norns do not give without taking, and what they take may be dearer than you know. That night, as Thor prepared for his journey, he found Loki waiting at the gates of Asgard, cloaked in shadows. You mean to seek the Loki asked, tilting his head. Thor narrowed his eyes. And what concern is it of yours, trickster? A grin spread across Loki's face. Only that the path to their well is filled with riddles and dangers. You will need more than strength, you will need wit. And who better to guide you than I? Thor hesitated. He knew Loki's words were a double-edged sword, yet a storm brewed in his heart, and the road ahead was too uncertain to walk alone. Very well, Thor said at last. But betray me, brother, and I will strike you down, prophecy or no. Loki's grin widened. Oh, Thor, when have I ever betrayed you? Thus began their journey into the roots of fate itself, where shadows whispered of endings not yet written. Thor's grip tightened on Mjölnir, and in his chest thunder roared. Whatever awaited him at the Well of Ard, he knew only this: the storm was not done with him yet. Chapter 37. The Journey to Urd's Well. The path to the Well of Ord was unlike any road Thor had ever traveled. Beneath the sprawling roots of Yggdrasil, the air grew heavy, thick with ancient magic that even the strongest warrior could not simply cleave apart. The roots themselves twisted like living serpents, pulsing with the lifeblood of creation. Every step closer felt as though the weight of fate pressed harder upon Thor's shoulders. Beside him walked Loki, his green cloak fluttering like a living shadow. His eyes darted to every movement in the darkness, not with fear, but with amusement, as if the journey itself was some elaborate game designed for him alone. Tell me, brother, Loki said with a sly grin, do you believe the Norns will simply hand you the truth you seek? That they will weave a new destiny for you, because you demand it? Thor's jaw tightened. I do not seek to change fate. I seek to understand it. If the storm grows within me, then I must know its purpose. Loki chuckled softly, his voice echoing in the cavernous dark. Purpose. Perhaps the storm has none. Perhaps it consumes simply because it must. Just like me. Thor glared, but said nothing. He had long since learned that Loki's words were daggers coated in honey-sweet at first, but designed to cut deep. As they ventured further, the air grew colder, the silence sharper. Strange lights flickered along the walls, shadows forming faces that whispered words neither god could fully understand. Thor gripped Mjölnir tightly, his heart pounding like distant thunder. At the base of one massive root, they encountered their first trial. A river of black water blocked their path, its surface rippling with visions, battlefields, burning worlds, corpses of gods and mortals alike. This is jail, Loki murmured, his voice tinged with reverence. The river that flows near Hell's domain. One wrong step, and it will drown you, not in water, but in your own fears. Thor frowned. Then how do we cross? Loki smiled, his eyes gleaming. With wit, of course. He stepped onto the riverbank and knelt, touching the black waters with his fingertips. Instantly, images swirled, visions of Loki bound in chains, venom dripping onto his face, and the end of all things. Yet Loki only smirked. Do not look too long, or you will see the death you most fear. Thor, stubborn as ever, strode forward and placed his foot upon the water. The river rippled violently, and visions surged before his eyes. He saw himself standing over Asgard, lightning tearing the sky apart. He saw gods falling at his feet, not enemies, but kin. Balder, Heimdall, even Odin all, struck down by his hand. The storm within him roared in approval. Thor staggered, nearly sinking into the black depths. But with a roar, he raised Mjölnir and slammed it into the ground. The river split, parting long enough for them to cross. Loki clapped slowly, mockingly. Brute force, as always. Effective, yes, but oh, so predictable. Thor ignored him and pressed forward. Beyond the river, they entered a cavern where 3 great statues loomed, stone giants carved in the likeness of forgotten gods. Each held an inscription, riddles that pulsed with light. Loki's eyes gleamed with excitement. Ah, now, this is my domain. The first statue spoke in a booming voice. I am taken from a mine, shut up in a wooden case, from which I am never released, and yet I am used by all. What am I? Thor scowled, clearly unamused. What nonsense is this? Loki grinned. The answer is simple, brother. Lead. The statue's eyes glowed, and the passage opened. The second statue spoke. The more you take, the more you leave behind. What am I? Thor frowned deeply. Battle scars. Loki chuckled. Close, but no. The answer is footsteps. The statue moved aside, granting them passage. Finally, the third statue thundered. I am not alive, yet I grow. I have no lungs, yet I breathe. I have no mouth, yet water kills me. What am I? Thor raised Mjölnir instinctively, but Loki raised a hand. Wait. This one, even you know. Thor hesitated, then said slowly, Fire. The statue crumbled, the path clearing before them. Thor allowed himself a small, grim smile. See? Loki said smugly. You're learning. At last, they reached a vast cavern, where the air shimmered with golden light. In the center stood the well of Ord, its waters glowing with the reflection of countless stars. The Norns were nowhere to be seen, but Thor felt their presence ancient, watching, waiting. He stepped forward, Mjölnir heavy in his hand. His heart thundered with the weight of every step. Here it is, Loki whispered, his voice strangely reverent. The well where all fates are written. Are you ready to learn, Thor? Truly ready. For once you see, you cannot unsee. Thor stood tall, the storm within him raging like never before. He raised his gaze to the glowing waters and spoke, his voice shaking the cavern. Then show me the truth of my fate. The waters rippled, and shadows began to rise. Chapter 38. The Weavers of Destiny. The well of Ord shimmered with unearthly brilliance, its surface rippling as though it were a mirror reflecting the very threads of existence. Thor stood at its edge, Mjölnir heavy at his side, the storm within him thrashing like a caged beast. Loki lingered just behind, his eyes sharp and calculating, as if savoring every detail of the unfolding moment. From the golden waters rose 3 figures, draped in robes spun from strands of time itself. Their hair flowed like woven silver, and their eyes burned with knowledge older than the gods themselves. These were the Nornser, Burgundy, and Skuld, the Weavers of Destiny. Eldest of the 3, spoke first. Her voice was like the groan of ancient stone. Thor Odinson, son of Odin, bearer of you have come to seek the truth of your storm. Do you understand the weight of what you ask? Thor straightened, his voice booming. I seek no lies, no riddles. If fate has chosen me for a path of ruin, then let me face it with open eyes. Vergandi, the middle sister, stepped forward. Her face was serene, her words flowing like a river. The storm within you is not merely your strength, it is your doom. You are not only a god of thunder, you are the harbinger of endings. When the last battle comes, your hammer will bring light to the dark, but it will also shatter what remains. Such is the path woven for you. Thor's heart sank, though he did not allow fear to touch his face. But it was Skuld, the youngest, whose voice pierced him deepest. And yet, threads shift. What is fated may bend, though it cannot break. The storm can destroy, but it can also protect. The choice of how you wield it remains yours until the day the wolf swallows the sun. Thor clenched Mjölnir so tightly that sparks leaped from its head. Then I am to bring both salvation and ruin. How can such a destiny exist? Ur's eyes gleamed. Because, Thunderer, you are not merely one man. You are the storm itself. And storms do not choose, they consume. At that, Thor's storm surged within him, demanding release. The well's surface rippled violently. Visions flooding before his eyes. Fire devouring Asgard. Serpents rising from the sea. Fenrir's jaws snapping shut on Odin. And himself, Thor, standing at the center of it all. Lightning splitting the sky as gods and monsters. He staggered back, gripping his chest. Loki stepped forward then, his voice low and mocking, though tinged with something more. So, brother, you see now. You will destroy as much as you save. Perhaps even more. And yet, he tilted his head, a strange smile curving his lips. That is what makes you magnificent. Thor's eyes burned with both fury and despair. He turned to the Norns, demanding, "Tell me, can this storm be mastered? Or am I doomed to let it consume all?" Vergandi answered softly, "The storm is part of you. To master it is not to cage it, but to embrace it. Only then will you stand as more than fate's puppet." Skuld raised her hand, and the waters of the well surged upward, forming a glowing thread of lightning. She placed it in Thor's palm. "This is your choice. Bind it, wield it, or unleash it. But know every choice reshapes the weave." Thor gazed at the crackling thread in his hand, its power vibrating through his bones. For the first time, he felt not fear, but clarity. The storm was not his curse. It was his test. The Norns began to fade, their forms dissolving back into the golden waters. But before they vanished entirely, gave a final warning. "Beware, Thunderer. The frost giants stir, the wolf grows restless, and the serpent coils ever tighter. All threads converge upon Ragnarok, and you are its thunderclap." With that, the well of Ord stilled, and silence fell. Thor stood, trembling, the thread of lightning still glowing faintly in his hand. Loki watched him, unreadable as ever. "Well, brother," Loki drawled at last, "now that you know you're both savior and destroyer, what will you do? March home in despair, or laugh in fate's face and carve your own path?" Thor lifted his gaze, thunder rumbling in his chest. His voice was low but unyielding. "I will not be fate's puppet. I will wield the storm on my terms." Lightning crackled overhead, and the roots of Yggdrasil shuddered. The journey had changed him, the true test still lay ahead. Chapter 39. The Oath of the Thunderer. The golden thread of lightning still glowed faintly in Thor's palm, as he and Loki stood in the shadow of Yggdrasil's roots. The air was thick with silence, Yet the silence was not empty, it pulsed with the weight of the prophecy the Norns had just revealed. For a long moment, Thor said nothing. His gaze was fixed on the faintly crackling thread, as though it contained not just power, but the answer to every torment that gnawed at his spirit. The storm within him no longer raged, blindly it waited. Loki broke the silence first, with a voice both playful and sharp. "So, brother, here you stand, told that you are both the hammer of salvation and the axe of destruction. Do you despair, or will you, as always, throw yourself into fate's jaws and laugh?" Thor's grip tightened around the thread until it merged with his hand and vanished into his flesh. Sparks ran up his arm and danced across His eyes glowed faintly blue, not with rage, but with resolve. "I will not despair," Thor rumbled. His voice carried the weight of mountains. "If the storm is mine to wield, then I will wield it for Asgard, for Midgard, and for all realms. If I must bring ruin, let it be to our enemies. If I must bring endings, let them be to those who threaten our people. So, I swear." He raised Mjölnir high, and the sky above Yggdrasil split open with a roar of thunder. Lightning poured downward, not in destruction, but in affirmation. The roots themselves seemed to hum with approval, though somewhere deep within, a shudder rippled, like the groan of the tree sensing the weight of destiny. Loki smirked, though for once his words held no venom. "An oath, is it? Bold, as always. But remember, Thor, oaths bind tighter than chains. The Norns do not weave lightly. By swearing, you may have carved your role even deeper into the tapestry." Thor turned to him, eyes fierce. "Better to walk with purpose into doom than to stumble blindly toward it. If Ragnarok comes, I will meet it not as fate's puppet, but as the Thunderer, master of the storm." For a brief moment, Loki's smirk faltered. He studied Thor with something like respect. But then his grin returned, sly as ever. "Very well, brother. If you are to be thunder, then I shall be the lightning's shadow. Together, perhaps, we can twist destiny enough to make the Norns choke on their own threads." Thor let out a booming laugh, the sound echoing through the roots of Yggdrasil. "Then stand with me, Loki, for all your mischief, your cunning may yet be the blade that cuts fate's snare." Loki bowed with mock flourish. "Gladly. But remember, storms and shadows do not always walk the same path." As they began to climb back up Yggdrasil's roots, a strange calm settled over Thor. For the first time since his storm had begun to grow, he felt not cursed, but chosen. His oath anchored him. His storm no longer screamed for release, surged with direction, like a river guided by its banks. Yet unseen by either god, deep in the branches of the world tree, threads shifted. The Norns had not lied. Oaths could strengthen fate, but they could also reshape it. And Thor's vow reverberated across realms like a thunderclap. In Jotunheim, the frost giants stirred uneasily. In Asgard, the Allfather felt a shiver crawl down his spine. And in the farthest depths of the sea, Jormungandr, the world serpent, coiled tighter, sensing the Thunderer's promise. Thor stood atop the route they had climbed. The 9 realms stretched out before him like a tapestry of stars. He lifted Mjölnir high and spoke, his words an oath to all creation. "By storm and strike, by blood and by bone, I swear, I will not bow to fate. I am Thor Odinson. I am thunder. And I shall decide how the storm ends." The heavens answered with a roar of lightning, so bright it seared the sky. And for that moment, Thor's oath became more than words. It became part of the weave itself. Chapter 40, The Whisper of Jormungandr. far beneath the silvered surface of the ocean, where sunlight could never reach and the pressure of the deep crushed all but the strongest creatures. Something vast stirred. The world serpent Jormungandr shifted in its endless coil around Midgard. Its scales shimmered with hues of green and black, and its breath was the cold current that tugged at the seabed. It had no need for words, for its essence was older than the tongues of gods and mortals. Yet on this day, the oath Thor had sworn beneath Yggdrasil traveled through the roots of the world tree, through the soil and rivers, down into the ocean's marrow. And Jormungandr heard. A low rumble vibrated through the water, like the growl of an ancient beast disturbed in its slumber. Its massive golden eyes opened, glowing with venomous light, and in the silence of the deep, it whispered not with sound, but with a ripple in the fabric of the 9 realms. Thor, standing still on the high root of Yggdrasil, froze. A sensation unlike any other clawed at his chest. It was as though a voice, vast and venomous, had slithered into his thoughts. Thunderer, breaker of skies, you swear to defy fate. You swear to bring the storm. Thor's hand gripped Mjölnir instinctively. He recognized the presence. At once he had faced it before in battle, though never this close, never this intimate. The serpent's essence was unmistakable. Jormungandr, Thor growled under his breath. So the beast awakens. Loki, ever attuned to the strange and hidden, turned sharply. His eyes darted across the horizon, as though he too had felt the whisper creep through reality. What is it, brother? You look as though the sea itself has climbed into your skull. Thor's voice was low, grim. The serpent speaks. My oath has reached its coils. Loki's face twisted into both delight and unease. Oh, how delicious. The world serpent, stirred by words spoken beneath the roots. Tell me, Thor, what did it say? Thor's gaze was fixed on the distant sea, where thunderclouds began to mass unnaturally fast. It asked if I defy fate, if I bring the storm. Loki chuckled, though it was brittle. And what did you answer? Thor raised Mjölnir high, lightning flickering across his arm. I do not answer to beasts. My oath was sworn not to Jormungandr, but to the realms themselves. Beneath the ocean, Jormungandr's coils tightened around Midgard. The seabed cracked. Volcanoes erupted in the deep, sending waves crashing onto distant shores. And again, the whisper slid into Thor's mind, more insistent, more poisonous. We are bound, you and I. When you roar, I stir. When you strike, I rise. Your oath feeds me, Thunderer. Every vow of storm strengthens my coil. Thor staggered for a moment, the weight of the voice pressing against his spirit. He snarled into the wind. Then know this, serpent. If my storm feeds you, it will also destroy you. I will not falter when the day comes. The ocean heaved violently, though Thor stood leagues away. A hiss spread across the 9 realms like a tide of venom. We shall see, son of Odin. The storm you swear to wield will break upon me, and I will drown you in venom until even your thunder is silent. Loki watched as Thor's face hardened, his jaw set like iron. He knew the bond between Thor and Jormungandr was more than rivalry, it was destiny. And now, the serpent had begun to weave itself into Thor's oath. You feel it, don't you? Loki whispered. The tighter you grip your storm, the closer you draw the serpent. Your battle is written, brother. Perhaps your vow has not defied fate at all, but sealed it. Thor did not look at him. He stared into the horizon, where lightning met the restless sea. Then let it be sealed. Better to meet the beast with thunder than to cower in silence. Far below, Jormungandr uncoiled slightly, stretching its colossal body. The oceans buckled. Storms rose from nothing. Ships across Midgard were swallowed by waves. Yet the serpent did not rise fully, not yet. It whispered once more, a promise rather than a threat. When the final storm comes, Thunderer, you will find me waiting. Your oath is my summons, and together we shall end the world. Thor closed his eyes, the serpent's voice echoing within him. For a fleeting moment, he felt the weight of inevitability. But then, he tightened his grip on Mjölnir and lifted his gaze to the storm he had sworn to command. If the serpent waits, then let it wait. I will meet it in thunder, and whether the world ends or not, Tit will know the wrath of Thor. Lightning cracked, splitting the sky in two.